welcome back. Give yourself a few seconds. Mentally kind of get here. Hi, welcome back to Physiology. This video focuses on specifically ATP and its role in metabolism. ATP, as you've probably learned in chemistry, organic chemistry, other classes, is this really kind of extraordinary molecule, really important molecule in biology. The ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. The reason that that's its name is because this right here, you might recognize it from genetics. This is adenine. You might recognize it from our earlier lectures when I pointed out this structure. This is adenine, so this is a base. And then you have here your pentose sugar. And then over here, 3 phosphate groups. That's where the triphosphate comes from. The base and the sugar are exactly the same as what you would see in DNA or RNA. So these look just like a nucleotide. What's different when it's adenosine triphosphate is that you have 3 phosphates in this molecule. In a nucleotide, you will only have 1 phosphate. And these 3 phosphates are what give adenosine triphosphate its ability to contribute energy. You've probably heard ATP called cellular energy or cellular currency. It's kind of like the money of the cell, but it's quick, easy money. So it's like that cash in your pocket, not the savings in the bank. Adenosine triphosphate. The 3 phosphates are what give it its ability to contribute energy to cellular processes. So how does it do that? It does that through the negative charges that are present on these phosphate groups. The negative charges represent potential energy. And you may remember from physics that potential energy is kind of like a coiled spring. If you take a spring and you squish it down, it quote unquote wants to stretch or pop back out. It's putting pressure like on your hands. If your hands were on either side of this spring pushing it together, it wants to expand back out. So these 3 phosphates with their potential energy, because of their extra negativity, are kind of like a coiled spring. The way that we get that energy is by breaking off one of those phosphates. We break off one of those phosphates, it's called hydrolysis. It changes what was once ATP to ADP, and a phosphate group. ADP is adenosine diphosphate. Instead of tri, now it's di, because there are 2 phosphates now instead of 3. That's why it's ADP. This process of breaking off that phosphate, this hydrolysis, releases energy, and this energy is then available to be used for cellular processes. much of this energy that's released from ATP hydrolysis is used in anabolic reactions. So remember, anabolic reactions are endergonic. Anabolic reactions are building things, and they require energy. We use the example of taking individual glucose molecules. So we have our little individual glucose molecules over here. And when we talked about anabolic reactions initially, we then talked about putting glucose into its more complex structure called glycogen. Well, this right here requires energy. If you will remember, the way that I sort of visualized that was like energy coming in, like this. Very little energy coming out. The energy for that comes from ATP hydrolysis. So, how do we get ATP? We get ATP, at least part of the energy, from those catabolic reactions. Remember, catabolic reactions are when we break something down. Part of the energy that's released from catabolic reactions is used to put that phosphate back on that ADP, and it starts the cycle all over again, because now we've put a phosphate on the ADP, now we have ATP, now we have cellular energy that we can use for cellular processes. And just to remind you, that's called phosphorylation, is the name for that. And just to remind you, when we talked about catabolic reactions, we took a polypeptide chain, and broke it apart into those individual amino acids. And this process releases energy, lots of energy. So that is exergonic. Okay, so that's an introduction to ATP. In metabolism, next we're going to talk about this whole phosphorylation, putting a phosphate on the ATP. How does that actually happen?